They told us not to look at each other that way. Not in school. Not in town. Not at the gas station when we passed each other. Him walking out with a soda, me walking in with my book bag held tight like maybe it could shield me from how much I noticed him. But you don't stop noticing someone just because the world says you should. His name was Daniel Porter. Tall. Quiet. White. He drove his father's truck like it weighed more than steel. And he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. That alone was enough to be dangerous in Virginia in 1956. I was 16, raised on yes ma'am and don't talk back. Church every Sunday. School every weekday at the black school, of course. We had hand-me-down books, chipped desks, a cafeteria that smelled like leftover decisions. But our teachers were fierce and kind and taught us how to read the world as well as the Bible. My mama worked as a cleaner for the Millers, the wealthiest family in our county. She said if I kept my head down and my grades up, maybe I could get out. Maybe D.C. Maybe nursing school. Maybe somewhere I didn't have to pretend I couldn't see the difference. Daniel wasn't supposed to talk to me, but he did. It started small. A hello at the produce stand. A second longer of eye contact than people like us were supposed to share. Once, we reached for the same peach. His hand brushed mine. We both froze. The shopkeeper stared like he was waiting for a siren. He left without the peach. I left with a heartbeat that didn't calm down for hours. One Saturday, I was walking home from the store, the summer air thick like soup. A truck pulled up beside me. I stopped. "You okay walking all this way?" he asked. I looked around. No one nearby, but you never knew who might be watching from a window. "I'm fine," I said. "You sure?" he asked, his voice careful, respectful. "It's a long walk." He didn't say get in. He didn't say let me drive you. Just, it's a long walk. So I said, it is. And he said, you want company? And I nodded. He parked the truck and walked with me. 10 feet apart. Side by side. Not a word between us for the first 10 minutes. Then, just before we turned onto my street, he said, "You like books?" I blinked. "I love books." "Me too," he said. "Especially the ones with quiet endings." That night, I couldn't sleep. We didn't date. That wasn't something we could do. We talked. Behind the library. Past the orchard where no one went anymore. He brought me a book once, To Kill a Mockingbird, and I told him that wasn't a safe gift, and he said, "It's not a gift. It's a loan." We sat and read in silence. And then, slowly, he let me read pieces of himself. His mother was strict. His father louder. They didn't talk about race in his house. Which was another way of saying they did. He said, "I never thought about any of it before." "Not really." I said, "I think about it every minute." He nodded. "I'm sorry." And he meant it. We touched for the first time in October. Just fingers. Just enough. My whole body felt like it had been waiting for that moment to remember how to breathe. That winter, he left town for 2 months. His uncle had a job in Richmond and offered him work. He left me with a note that said, "If I write to you, will you write me back?" I burned it. But I memorized it first. He wrote me 3 letters. I didn't answer the first. Or the second. But the third said, "You don't have to say anything. Just let me know you're okay." So I sent him a single page that said, "I'm here. I still read. I still think about you." When he came back, it was spring. And everything was blooming, including the thing between us. He asked me to meet him one night out by the edge of the river, under the old train bridge. I knew better. But I went. He stood there, hands in his jacket, looking like the world might fall if I didn't say something kind. "I want to be around you," he said. I don't care who sees, I said, but they do. He stepped closer. Let them. I didn't answer. But I didn't run either. That was the night we kissed. It wasn't wild. It wasn't rushed. It was quiet. Like we were writing a sentence the rest of the world didn't have permission to read. We didn't know what would come next. But that night, under the bridge, I remember thinking, we aren't supposed to love each other. But maybe that's exactly why we have to. For a while, it felt like we existed in a space just wide enough for two people and the silence between them. The orchard became our church. The river, our mailbox. The space beneath the bridge, our borrowed hour. We never said forever. We never said love out loud. But it hung in the air between us, like fog that never burned off. Then came the first whisper. A neighbor asked my mother if she'd seen me walking with someone who doesn't belong on this side of town. Mama didn't answer. She just stared long enough to make the woman regret asking. That night, Mama sat me down at the kitchen table. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked tired. You're playing with fire, she said. And fire don't care who's holding the match. I told her it wasn't like that. She looked at me hard. Baby, I was born here. I know what like that means. I didn't say his name, but I think she already knew. After that, we started writing. Not love letters, not really. More like borrowed thoughts. He'd leave a folded page behind the second fence post by the school, the one that had always leaned a little. I'd leave mine behind the old sign at the edge of the orchard. It was safer. Or so we thought. One day, his letter just said, I want you to know the sound of my voice when I say your name. Not just in secret. Not in hiding. Yours, Daniel. I read it 5 times before tearing it in half, not from anger. From fear. Then I taped it back together. Words started to spread. A white boy walking too often on the east side of town. A black girl seen near the orchard after dark. No one said anything to our faces. But people said plenty behind them. I got stared at in the store. He got passed over at the garage for shifts he usually worked. The librarian stopped smiling when I asked for books. The silence got louder. We tried to pull back. Met less. Wrote less. But even that didn't feel safe anymore. He passed me once on the road and didn't even nod. It was the right thing to do. And it felt like being erased. Then one evening, I came home to find Mama standing on the porch. In her hand, a folded note. Daniel's. She'd found it behind the fence post. She didn't say a word. Just handed it to me. I opened it. I miss the sound of your footsteps before I see you. I miss the way you read my silences. I miss the you I'm not supposed to know. I looked up at her. My voice caught before it reached the air. I know, she said softly. I know, baby. Then, after a pause. And I know what this town does to girls like you who don't follow the script. I tried to speak. She raised her hand. I don't hate him. But I know what can happen. And I won't lose you to somebody else's anger. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. You need to end this. Not because I don't believe in it, but because I believe in you. That night, I walked to the river. He was already there. His face lit up when he saw me, but fell the moment he saw mine. He didn't ask what happened. He just said, "It's over, isn't it?" I nodded. He nodded too. Then he stepped forward, real slow, and held out his hand. I didn't shake it. I wrapped my fingers around his and didn't let go for a long, long time. We didn't kiss. We just stood there. Two people trying to memorize the moment before they'd be asked to forget it. When I turned to leave, I handed him a note I'd written earlier. Just in case. Don't write me again. But keep the ones I sent. And know this. I was never ashamed. Not once. Time didn't erase him. It softened the edges, maybe. Turned the sharp pain into something dull and quiet. But not gone. After that last night under the bridge, I left. Mama said it was best, and maybe she was right. I moved to Richmond, stayed with an aunt, and then started nursing school in Washington, D.C. I told everyone I was moving forward. But I packed his letters. They fit inside a shoebox. I tied them with a blue ribbon from an old Sunday dress and carried them like a secret that still breathed. Life moved fast. I studied. I worked long nights at the hospital. I learned how to stitch wounds, calm panic, read pain before it spoke. The city was bigger than anything I'd ever known. No one looked twice at me. No one whispered when I walked alone. It was freedom in a way, but also loneliness. No familiar faces. No yellow gate. No second fence post. I kept the box on a shelf in the back of my closet. I didn't open it, but I didn't forget it was there. Sometimes I saw people who reminded me of him. A tall man with a quiet voice. A pair of blue eyes that looked at the world like it owed no one an apology. A boy in the hospital waiting room, holding a paperback novel like it mattered more than anything around him. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just part of who I'd been, not who I was becoming. Then one day, the law changed. The Supreme Court ruled that people like us, like Daniel and me, could marry, could be seen, could exist without hiding. I held the newspaper in my hands and sat on the hospital steps for a long time, just staring at the headline. It felt like too little, too late. And still, it was something. One of the older nurses leaned over my shoulder. "Can you believe we had to ask permission to love?" she said, half laughing, half angry. I didn't answer, because in my heart I already had. That week, I received an envelope. No return address. No signature. Inside, a small clipping of that same Supreme Court article and a single handwritten sentence. "Now that the law has caught up, will the people?" I didn't need a name. I knew his handwriting. I didn't respond. Not with a letter. But I took the shoebox down from the shelf, untied the ribbon, and read every page again. His voice came back, soft as ever, saying things no one else ever had. I fell asleep with one of his notes on my chest. In the morning, I placed it back in the box. Then I wrote something new. "I'm still here. I still remember how you sounded saying my name." I didn't send it. Just folded it and slid it into the shoebox with the others. That fall, Mama got sick. I traveled back home every weekend. The house felt smaller, quieter. The porch steps creaked more. The yellow gate was faded, peeling, but it was still there. She never asked about him. But once, while I was washing dishes, she said, "Some loves don't end. They just wait for courage." I didn't reply. I just dried my hands and walked outside, sat on the porch, and looked down the road like maybe it would bring him back. On one of those weekends, I stopped at a diner halfway between the city and home. I needed coffee and something warm before the road. I sat in the corner, opened my book, and tried to disappear. But then the door opened. And there he was. Daniel. He hadn't changed much. Older, sure. A little more tired around the eyes. But still him. He didn't see me at first. But then he did. And we both froze. He didn't rush over. He just walked slowly to the counter, ordered coffee, and sat at the other end of the diner. Like we were two planets circling. But before I left, I stood up, walked to his table, and said, "Still like quiet endings?" He looked up and smiled. I always did. We talked outside for 5 minutes. Just 5. About our jobs. About our mothers. About books. Not about the bridge. Not about the orchard. Not about the letters. When I turned to leave, he said, "Can I see you again?" I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. That night, I took out the letter I hadn't sent. I wrote a second line. If you're still waiting, I might be too. We didn't rush it. After the diner, weeks passed before I saw him again. A letter arrived first, one of the real kind. Folded by hand. Postmarked from a small town I hadn't heard of. Inside, just 2 lines. I never stopped carrying you. I just didn't know where to take you. I stared at those words for an hour. Then I wrote back. We didn't try to restart everything. We didn't try to pretend we were still 17. Instead, we met for walks. Simple, quiet. On park benches. In libraries. Once in the back pew of a church, where the sermon was long and the silence between us said more than any preacher ever could. We spoke slowly, carefully, like people who had learned the cost of words held too long. I asked him once, "Did you ever try to forget me?" He didn't blink. "No," he said. "I just stopped letting myself remember for too long." Then, with a small laugh, he added, "Didn't work though." We didn't kiss again until months later. It wasn't in a movie moment. No music, no bridge, no dramatic pause. We were sitting on the steps outside my apartment, watching the streetlights flicker. He reached for my hand. I let him. And when I turned to say something, I forgot what it was. His lips were already there. Soft. Familiar. Like finishing a sentence I started years ago. Later, I asked him, "Why now?" He said, "Because I'm not scared of being seen anymore." Then he asked me, "And you?" I said, "Because the world's loud enough now that our silence doesn't have to be the only thing they hear." We never married. Not because we couldn't, but because, in some ways, we already had. Over time. Over ink and paper. Over a bridge and a promise we never really broke. Mama passed that spring. She never saw us together again, but I think she knew. She once told me, "Love is the quietest kind of courage." I didn't understand it then. I do now. The last letter I wrote him wasn't mailed. I left it on his nightstand the first time I stayed at his house. It said, "I never stopped answering you. I just needed time to hear the question." He never mentioned it out loud. But months later, I found it folded in his wallet, worn, creased, loved. We grew older. We built a life that didn't need approval. We built it in small ways: dinners, shared books, long walks without looking over our shoulders. He called me his peace. I called him my stillness. And together, we learned what love looks like when it doesn't need to hide. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if those letters had reached us sooner. If the laws had changed quicker. If the town had looked the other way or looked closer. But then I remember. Some things arrive right on time, even if they take half a lifetime to get there. He passed before me. Quietly. Kindly. Just like he lived. At the service, someone asked me how long we'd been together. I said, "Since we first looked at each other." They smiled politely, not knowing the whole story. But I did. And that was enough. Now, when I sit on our porch, I still hear his voice, not loud, not clear, but steady. And sometimes I still write him. Just a line or two. Not because I expect a reply, but because I always loved how his name looked on the page.